Good morning, everyone, from CBS News Election Headquarters on this day following the balloting for the 34th man to occupy the White House, the 34th President of the United States, or the 35th President if you count Grover Cleveland, who had a split term twice. It appears now that that man will be 43-year-old Senator John Fitzgerald Kennedy, third-generation son of Irish immigrants, the first Roman Catholic to ever serve in the White House, the youngest man to ever be elected to a term in the White House. However, there is still a mathematical possibility that John Kennedy, even at this late time, 8 o'clock Eastern Time in New York City, will not be that man. It could happen in a rather odd calculation of the mathematical possibilities. Right at the moment, Senator John Kennedy has 285 electoral votes. It only takes 269 to win the presidency. As you know, the President of the United States is decided by an electoral college, so-called, rather than the popular vote. The popular vote is registered in each state by the voters of the United States to elect a set of electors. We do not vote directly on the presidency here, despite the way the ballots may read, but all of them read electors for John Kennedy or electors for the Nixon Lodge ticket. And you are voting, or you voted yesterday, for electors in these states. By the majority vote in each state, the electors who are usually pledged in advance must cast their votes in the state for the candidate who wins a majority in their own state. These votes are cast at the State House, the capital of the states, in the middle of next month in December. They are sent by mail to New York and are officially read before a joint session of Congress in the opening days of January. So we do not know officially until January, but of course with modern electronic means we do actually know by popular vote who the next president will be. At least we think in this very close election of 1960 that we know, and we think the man right now is John Kennedy. As I said, however, he now has 285 electoral votes with 269 needed. And the vote is so close in many states that it could still, conceivably, mathematically, go over to Senator or to Vice President Nixon even yet. He has 190 electoral votes. Illinois, for instance, which has been given to Kennedy, 27 electoral votes, could still switch over and go into the Nixon column. And if that happened and Nixon picked up all of the still 4 outstanding states, he could conceivably still win this election. The outstanding states are California, with its big block of 32 electoral votes, the second highest block in the United States. New York is highest with 45. California and Pennsylvania share the second spot with 32. Minnesota, with its block of 11 states, 11 electoral votes, has not been registered definitely in one column or the other yet. New Mexico with 4 and Alaska with 3 are outstanding. That's a total of 50 electoral votes, and if Illinois should switch over, that would be enough to give the election to Vice President Nixon instead of to Senator Kennedy, the man who appears to have won at this hour. Some 13 hours after the polls closed in New York State, and rather in many of the eastern states. New York didn't close until sometime later than that, and other states closed a little bit earlier. But it's been a long night of counting, a long night of recording the votes in the CBS television election headquarters here, and we still are not absolutely certain who the winner is. At 3:22 a.m. Eastern Time, that was several hours ago, around 5 or 6 hours ago now, Vice President Richard Nixon appeared before his campaign workers at his election headquarters in the Ambassador Hotel in Los Angeles, and he told his supporters that as the present trend was going, it appeared that Kennedy would be the winner. However, he did not make a concession and said that he was going to bed and would not have a further statement until sometime later on this morning. Senator Kennedy, when he heard that at his home in Hyannisport, Massachusetts, made a similar decision. He felt that any statement from him would be out of order until he had heard from Vice President Nixon, and so he went to bed also. We are awaiting statements from these two gentlemen. It's only a little after 5 o'clock in Los Angeles now, and we do not expect anything from Vice President Nixon for some time as yet. He had planned to spend this day of Wednesday in Los Angeles and fly to Washington on Thursday. He now has advised through his news secretary, Herb Klein, that he very possibly will go to Washington today. Let's look now at the western side of the United States, where Grant Holcomb has spent a evening of yeoman service giving us the reports there, where the election could still hinge. Grant, give us your report now, will you?
Well, Walter, when you mention a razor-thin edge, you can certainly be talking about the West. One of the interesting things is the number of states that Vice President Nixon has carried in the 13 western states. He has apparently won 9 of 13, and he is leading in the 10th. Very quickly, let's run down just the top of this presidential board and take a look at every one of these 13 states. First of all, Alaska, and you can see that there the margin of difference is just a few hundred votes. Over in the next panel, Arizona's 4 electoral votes safely in the Nixon column. In California, that's the big one. We're going to come back to that in a few moments, but the vote is coming in very slowly out there, and we're not going to have anything significant for several hours. All right, over in Colorado, again, Nixon, 6 electoral votes have gone into the column from Colorado. Hawaii, the new 50th state, has gone for Nixon by a razor-thin margin. Look at Idaho. You can see the same situation there. Montana, it's 4 electoral votes for Nixon. Kennedy won in Nevada, the next panel over, but the margin was only about 3,000 votes. Now, look at New Mexico. That's a neck-and-neck race all evening long. Next panel, Oregon, you can see that Nixon has won. Nixon has won in Utah. Since we last reported to you, he has taken the state of Washington, and then the final 13th state, Wyoming, is a Nixon state. So you can see it is very, very close for Nixon in the West, and Kennedy's margin is very close in the West. Walter, the big one, of course, being California.
Leonard has his eye on the middle western states for us. Bill, can you give us a report there?
Well, Walter, all evening long, 3 big states in the Middle West have been the key to this election, and it looks as if enough of them, all 3 of them, you're probably familiar with them by now, are going to swing into the Kennedy column. There, of course, Illinois, where 90% about of the vote is in, and Kennedy's leading by about 60-some thousand votes. It should be enough, our correspondent in Chicago, Bernard Eisman, tells us, to carry Illinois for Kennedy. Then moving on to Michigan, that one's wrapped up too. 98% of the precincts are in. Kennedy leads 1,662,000 to 1,582,000. And then Minnesota, where it's been close all night, but a narrow Kennedy victory, 588 to 575, with nearly 80% of the precincts reporting. The rest of the Middle West story has been pretty much a Nixon story. He carried states he wasn't expected to carry, but he didn't carry the ones he had to carry to win. Now back to you, Walter Cronkite.
And the popular vote, 84% of the precincts counted now. Kennedy, 30,210,000 votes. Nixon, 29,553,000 votes. To give Kennedy just a little margin over 50% of the vote. Nixon, almost 50% of the vote. One of the closest elections in our nation's history has been recorded in this year of 1960. In the Senate, the Republicans have taken a seat from the Democrats in Delaware, and in Wyoming, the Democrat has won a seat there. So in the new composition of the Senate, it will be 64 Democrats and 36 Republicans, apparently. In the House, 173 Republicans, 264 Democrats. That's the story from election headquarters. We were giving you a capitulation on the House seats. The Republicans held 154 in the last House and the 86th Congress. The Democrats held 283. The Democrats have lost in the House, but still hold a very comfortable and working majority, as you see there. 264 seats they will have. the Republicans have apparently picked up, at this count at any rate, 173. However, in many of the House areas, with the rural votes trickling in over a period of days, that figure could change. But roughly, that seems to be the makeup, a gain of 19 seats for the Republicans in the 87th Congress, and it is rare indeed that such a change takes place in a presidential year when a president has been elected by the other party. Let's go take a look at the southern board now, and I think my friend Grant Holcomb has moved to the south. Grant?
Well, thank you all, Walter. I'm taking a quick look at the south because we've had the reports in from the south earlier in the evening, starting with Alabama. Alabama went for Kennedy with this margin. In the next panel, Arkansas's 8 electoral votes in the Kennedy column. In the next state, Florida's 10 electoral votes went to Vice President Nixon. Georgia remained in the southern fold as expected. The 12 votes went to Kennedy. In the next panel, Kentucky. Nixon won in Kentucky, and the 10 votes fell in his electoral column. In Louisiana, it was Kennedy, and the 10 electoral votes went to him. Now, we move next to Mississippi, and this is the state where the unpledged delegation won, and you will note the margin. Compare first the top panel with the lower panel, and you'll see again a very razor-thin vote. Interesting thing is the closeness in practically every state this evening. Now, North Carolina. North Carolina went for Kennedy, as did South Carolina in the neighboring panel. But Nixon won in Tennessee. Texas, that was a big question mark before this evening, but with all of the votes in the next panel, 24 electoral votes, it went to Kennedy, Vice Presidential candidate Johnson bringing in his home state. Vice President Nixon won in Virginia, and in West Virginia, it was Kennedy. So the South remained pretty solid, but not as solid as a lot of Southerners would have liked to see it remain, Walter.
All right, Grant. A moment ago, I think I misplaced the party affiliation of the gentleman elected in Wyoming. A tragic mistake, obviously, after all the effort that has gone into this matter, but for the parties, that is, not for us. In Wyoming, the Republican candidate won the Senate seat vacated by retirement up there of the Democratic incumbent. Keith Thompson won that election in Wyoming, beating Democrat Raymond Whitaker. In Delaware, as I reported, the Republican incumbent governor, Jay Calaboggs, beat out the incumbent Democratic Senator Alan Frears, who will not be returning to the Senate, and those 2 seats now go to the Republicans to give them the 36 votes they will have in the Senate to the 64 for the Democrats. Gains recorded in both the Senate and the House this year on the Republican side, although apparently the Democratic candidate for president has been elected. This situation has prevailed only 3 other times since the Civil War, the most recent in 1956, when Eisenhower also noted losses in the House, although he won the presidency, of course. And so our popular count, 85% of the precincts reported Kennedy 30,271,000, Nixon 29,606,000. As you see, barely 600,000 votes separating those gentlemen. Kennedy 285 electoral votes, far and away enough to win if he holds on to all of them. Nixon 188 electoral votes. That's the report from CBS News election headquarters at this hour on Wednesday morning.